Jake Miller wiped grease from his hands with an old rag and looked at the smoking engine in front of him. The hyperdrive on the cargo ship New Horizon had given up 3 hours ago, right in the middle of nowhere. Well, not exactly nowhere. They were close to the Zephyrian Empire's main space station, which was both good and bad news. Good news because they could get help. Bad news because everything in this fancy part of space cost way too much money. "How bad is it?" asked Captain Tony Rodriguez, leaning against the doorway of the engine room. Jake shrugged. "The coolant system is dead. We need new parts, and we need them fast. If we don't fix this soon, the whole engine will blow up." "Great," Tony said. "Just great. Do you know how much they charge for parts around here?" "More than we can afford," Jake replied. He had been working on ships for 10 years, and he knew when someone was trying to rip him off. The Zephyrian Empire was famous for 2 things: their beautiful Empress and their expensive everything. The New Horizon docked at the massive space station an hour later. Jake grabbed his toolbox and headed out to find the parts they needed. The station was huge, with shiny walls and fancy lights everywhere. Aliens in expensive clothes walked around like they owned the place, which Jake supposed they probably did. He found a parts dealer after walking for 20 minutes. The alien behind the counter had blue skin and too many eyes. He looked at Jake's dirty work clothes and smiled in a way that meant trouble. "Human ship?" the dealer asked. "Yeah," Jake said. "I need coolant regulators for a Class 7 hyperdrive." The price the dealer gave him made Jake laugh out loud. "You're kidding, right? I can get those parts for half that price anywhere else." "This is not anywhere else," the dealer said. "This is the Imperial capital. Everything here costs more." Jake was about to argue when alarms started going off all over the station. Red lights flashed, and a voice came over the speakers speaking in the local language. Jake's translator told him it was something about the Empress arriving. "Oh no," the dealer said, suddenly looking worried. "The Empress is coming here. Her ship must need repairs." "So?" Jake asked. The dealer stared at him like he had grown a second head. "So? You do not understand. When the Empress needs something fixed, everyone else waits. Your ship will have to wait days, maybe weeks." Jake felt his temper rising. They did not have days or weeks. They had maybe 6 hours before their engine turned into a very expensive bomb. "Look," he said to the dealer, "I just need parts. I don't care about your Empress or her ship." The dealer looked around nervously. "You cannot say things like that here. Show respect." "I'll show respect when someone earns it," Jake said. "Right now, I just need to fix my ship." He left the parts shop and started looking for another one. The station was getting more crowded as word spread that the Empress was coming. Aliens in fancy uniforms were running around, trying to make everything perfect. Jake finally found what he needed at a small shop run by an old alien who looked tired. The price was still too high, but it was better than the first place. Jake bought the parts and headed back toward the docks. That's when he saw the ship. It was the biggest, fanciest ship Jake had ever seen. Gold and silver covered the outside, and it had more weapons than most military ships. It was also leaking coolant all over the dock. "Idiots," Jake muttered. Someone had clearly been doing maintenance wrong for months. The ship was beautiful, but the engines were a mess. Palace guards in shiny armor were standing around the ship, looking worried. One of them was talking into a communicator, and Jake could hear him saying they needed an engineer right away. Jake almost kept walking. It was not his problem. But then he saw how bad the leak was getting. If someone did not fix it soon, that expensive ship was going to blow up, and take half the dock with it. He walked over to the guards. "Hey," he said, "your ship is about to explode." The guards looked at him like he was crazy. Jake was wearing old work clothes covered in grease, and his toolbox was held together with tape. "Who are you?" one of the guards asked. "I'm an engineer," Jake said. "And your coolant system is failing. See that green stuff leaking out? That's not supposed to do that." The guard looked at the green puddle under the ship, then back at Jake. "Our engineers are on their way." "Good for them," Jake said, "but by the time they get here, you'll need a new ship. That leak is getting worse every minute." He started to walk away, but the guard called after him. "Wait, can you fix it?" Jake looked at the ship again. It was not really his problem, but he hated seeing good equipment get ruined by bad maintenance. "Yeah, I can fix it, but I'll need to get inside." "Impossible," another guard said. "This is the Empress's personal ship. No one goes inside without permission." "Then get permission," Jake said. "Or explain to your Empress why her ship is now a pile of scrap metal." The guards talked among themselves in hushed voices. Finally, one of them spoke into his communicator. After a few minutes of waiting, he nodded to Jake. "You have permission, but touch nothing except what needs to be fixed." Jake climbed into the ship and immediately started laughing. The inside was even more ridiculous than the outside. Everything was covered in gold or jewels. The pilot's chair looked like a throne. But the important stuff, the engines and life support systems, had been ignored for months. "Whoever maintains this thing should be fired," Jake said to himself. He got to work, replacing broken parts and fixing connections that had been done wrong. It took him 2 hours, but he got the coolant system working properly. He also fixed 3 other problems he found along the way, because leaving them broken would have bothered him. When he climbed out of the ship, the guards were waiting with someone new. It was a woman in expensive clothes who looked important. She had long dark hair and purple eyes that seemed to see everything. "You fixed the ship?" she asked. "Yeah," Jake said, wiping his hands on his rag. "But someone needs to talk to whoever does your maintenance. They're doing everything wrong. This ship should have blown up weeks ago." The woman stared at him for a long moment. "Do you know who I am?" Jake shrugged. "Lady, I don't really care who you are. I just fixed your ship because I hate seeing good equipment get ruined by bad work. Next time, find better mechanics." He picked up his toolbox and started walking back to his own ship. Behind him, he could hear the guards making shocked noises, but he ignored them. He had his own ship to fix. What Jake did not know was that the woman in expensive clothes was Empress Lyrale Voss, ruler of 300 star systems. She had just been called Lady by a human engineer who clearly had no idea who she was. And for the first time in 5 years, someone had walked away from her without asking for anything. The Empress watched Jake disappear into the crowd, and for reasons she could not explain, she smiled. 3 days passed before Jake saw the woman again. He was sitting in the station's cafe, drinking what they called coffee but tasted like burnt metal. The New Horizon was finally fixed, but Captain Rodriguez was waiting for some paperwork to clear before they could leave. Jake was reading technical manuals on his tablet when someone sat down across from him. He looked up and saw the same woman from the fancy ship. She was wearing simpler clothes now, but they still looked expensive. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. "You're already sitting," Jake pointed out. "But sure, I guess." She smiled at that. "I wanted to thank you for fixing my ship." "It's fine," Jake said, going back to his reading. "Just doing my job." Most people would have asked for payment. Or a reward. Jake looked up again. Most people would have charged you extra because of that fancy ship. I just fixed what was broken. The woman seemed amused by his answer. What's your name? Jake Miller. What's yours? Lyra, she said after a moment. Nice to meet you, Lyra. So what do you do when you're not flying around in ships that cost more than entire planets? She laughed, and Jake realized she had a nice laugh. I work in government. That explains the fancy ship, Jake said. Government types always have the best toys and the worst maintenance crews. You really don't know who I am, do you? Lyra asked. Jake shrugged. Should I? Are you famous or something? Something like that. They talked for an hour. Jake told her about Earth, about how humans were still pretty new to space travel compared to other species. Lyra asked questions about human technology and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. Your coffee is terrible, by the way, Jake said as he finished his cup. I'll pass along your complaint, Lyra said with a smile. Jake saw her again the next day and the day after that. She always found him in the cafe or in the repair bay where he was helping other ships. She asked good questions about engineering and seemed to understand the technical stuff better than most people. Don't you have a job to do? Jake asked on the fourth day. I'm between meetings, Lyra said. Besides, talking to you is more interesting than most of my work. Government work is pretty boring, Jake agreed. All those meetings and paperwork, and people trying to look important. You have no idea, Lyra said. What Jake did not know was that Lyra was actually Empress Lyra Voss, and her meetings were with alien kings and diplomats from across the galaxy. What he also did not know was that news of their conversations was spreading through the palace like wildfire. For 5 years, the Empress had rejected marriage proposals from every important alien in known space. Princes, generals, and wealthy. Merchants had all tried to win her favor. Some offered entire star systems as wedding gifts. Others brought armies to prove their strength. All of them had been turned away. Now palace guards were reporting that the Empress was spending hours talking to a human mechanic who called her Lyra and complained about the coffee. The news reached other parts of the galaxy, too. In the dark regions of space, where the hegemony war machine held its secret meetings, military leaders were discussing a different problem. Humans are becoming too dangerous, said General Krex, a massive alien with 4 arms and no patience. Their technology advances too quickly. Their ships are too efficient. Their weapons are too creative. They are still a young species, pointed out Admiral Zara. They have been in space for less than 2 centuries. Exactly, Krex replied. In 2 centuries, they have gone from primitive rockets to hyperdrive technology that rivals our own. What will they accomplish in another 2 centuries? Or 5? The hegemony was a collection of military-focused species that believed in strength above all else. They had watched humanity's rapid expansion with growing alarm. Humans did not conquer planets like other species. Instead, they made friends, shared technology, and somehow convinced everyone to work together. It was disgusting. We should strike now, Krex continued. Before they become too strong to stop. The Empress protects them, Admiral Zara pointed out. The Zephyrian Empire has defensive treaties with Earth. The Empress, Krex said with contempt, cares more about her pretty dresses than real threats. She will not fight a real war to protect humans. Plans were made in secret. The hegemony would hit Earth hard and fast before human defenders could react. Once Earth was destroyed, the rest of humanity would surrender or be destroyed 1 colony at a time. It was a good plan, except for one thing they did not know. Back on the space station, Jake was having another conversation with Lyra about human engineering methods. He was explaining how humans like to build things that could be easily repaired instead of replaced. Most species design ships to last exactly as long as the warranty, Jake said. Humans build ships that their grandchildren can fix with basic tools. Why? Lyra asked. Because space is dangerous and help is usually far away, Jake explained. If your ship breaks down, you want to be able to fix it yourself. You don't want to wait for a certified technician to show up. That makes sense, Lyra said. But it must make your ships less efficient. Actually, it makes them more efficient, Jake said. Simple designs use less power and break down less often. Fancy technology is great until it stops working. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Is that why humans are so successful in space? Because you plan for things to go wrong? Maybe, Jake said. Other species seem to expect everything to work perfectly all the time. Humans expect everything to break eventually. Interesting philosophy. Not really philosophy, Jake said. Just common sense. What neither of them knew was that the hegemony had finished their planning. Warships were moving toward Earth, hidden, in the dark, between stars. The attack would come soon. Jake finished his coffee and made his usual face of disgust. Seriously, who made this stuff? It tastes like engine coolant. I'll talk to someone about getting better coffee, Lyra said. Don't bother, Jake said. We're leaving tomorrow anyway. Captain Rodriguez finally got all his paperwork approved. For the first time since he had met her, Lyra looked genuinely disappointed. You're leaving? Yeah, we've got cargo to deliver. That's what cargo ships do. Where are you going? Earth first, to pick up some passengers, then out to the frontier colonies. Should be a good trip. Lyra was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Be careful out there. Always am, Jake said. Space is dangerous enough without taking stupid risks. He stood up to leave, then turned back. Hey, Lyra. Thanks for the conversations. It was nice talking to someone who understands technical stuff. Thank you too, Jake. For everything. Jake walked away, already thinking about the repairs he needed to finish before they left. He did not see the sadness in Lyra's eyes or notice the way she watched him until he disappeared from sight. The next morning, the New Horizon left the station and headed for Earth. Jake was back in the engine room, making sure everything ran smoothly for the long trip home. He was thinking about Earth coffee and wondering if he would ever see Lyra again when the hegemony attack fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's moon. The war had begun, and Jake Miller was about to discover that some things were more important than fixing engines. The emergency alert came through when Jake was sleeping. Red lights flashed in his small cabin as the ship's computer announced an incoming priority message from Earth Defense Command. Jake rolled out of his bunk and stumbled to the communication station. Captain Rodriguez was already there, his face pale as he listened to the message. What's going on? Jake asked. Tony turned to him with eyes full of shock. Earth is under attack. Multiple enemy fleets. They hit the major cities first. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. How bad? Bad, Tony said quietly. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, all gone. Denver got hit 3 hours ago. Denver. Jake's sister Lisa lived in Denver with her husband and 2 kids. He had been planning to visit them when they got back to Earth. Any word on survivors? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer from Tony's expression. The cities are gone, Jake. Everything in a 50-mile radius of each impact site. They use some kind of plasma bombardment. Nothing left but glass. Jake stood there for a moment, not moving, not speaking. Lisa was dead. Her husband, Mark, was dead. Their kids, Amy and Ben, were dead. His little nephew, who loved hearing stories about space adventures, would never hear another story. "Jake?" Tony said carefully. "You okay?" Jake looked at him with eyes that had gone completely cold. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not okay." He walked back to his cabin and sat down at his personal computer. His hands were steady as he began typing a message. The anger was there, burning inside him like a reactor core, but it was controlled anger, focused anger, the kind of anger that got things done. He sent the message to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. The message was simple. "This is Jake Miller on the cargo ship New Horizon. By now you've all heard about Earth. They hit the cities first, killed millions of civilians, including children. They think we're weak because we don't start wars. They think we're soft because we make friends instead of enemies. Time to show them what happens when you hurt human families. Pass this message along. It's time for humans to remind the galaxy why evolution made us the hunters instead of the prey." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours, Jake's communicator was full of messages from humans across known space. Ship captains changing course to head for rally points. Engineers on space stations suddenly discovering that their stations had defensive capabilities that had somehow never been mentioned in the official specs. Dr. Susan Walsh, chief engineer at the Proxima Research Station, sent a particularly interesting message. "Jake, we've been working on some new technology. Turns out our scientific research has some military applications. How do you feel about turning hegemony ships into scrap metal?" Jake smiled for the first time since hearing about Earth. It was not a nice smile. On the Zephyrian space station, Empress Lyrale was in an emergency meeting with her military advisors when news of the Earth attack reached them. "The hegemony has declared war on humanity," Admiral Kane reported. "They struck without warning and destroyed several major population centers." "How many dead?" the Empress asked. "Estimates suggest around 50 million civilians in the first wave." The Empress was quiet for a long moment. She was thinking about Jake Miller, who was probably somewhere between her station and Earth right now. Was he alive? Was his family safe? "Your Majesty," one of her advisors said carefully, "the hegemony has requested that we stay neutral in this conflict. They claim humanity is a threat to galactic peace." "A threat to galactic peace?" the Empress repeated. "They just murdered 50 million civilians and they're calling humans the threat?" "The hegemony argues that human technological advancement is dangerous. They claim this action is necessary for galactic security." The Empress stood up, and everyone in the room could see the anger in her purple eyes. "Send a message to the hegemony. Tell them the Zephyrian Empire condemns their unprovoked attack on Earth. Tell them we will provide humanitarian aid to human colonies and refugees." "Your Majesty," another advisor said nervously, "that could be seen as taking sides." "Good," the Empress replied, "because that's exactly what we're doing." Meanwhile, Jake was busy coordinating with other humans throughout the galaxy. What the hegemony did not understand was that humans had been preparing for something like this their entire history. Every human had ancestors who had survived wars, famines, disasters, and attacks by things bigger and stronger than they were. Humans were very good at surviving. They were even better at making sure the things that hurt them did not survive. "Okay, listen up," Jake said during a video conference with human engineers from 12 different systems. "The hegemony thinks they can hit our home, and we'll surrender. They think we're weak because we prefer making friends to making enemies. Time to educate them. What do you have in mind? Asked Pete Chen, an engineer on the frontier colony of New Shanghai. The hegemony is used to fighting traditional wars, Jake explained. Big fleets shooting at each other until someone wins. That's not how humans fight. We fight smart. Over the next week, Jake watched as his fellow humans began putting their plan into action. It was not a plan in the traditional sense. No one was giving orders or coordinating from a central command. Instead, humans were doing what they did best, solving problems. The problem was simple. How do you defeat an enemy that is bigger, stronger, and has more ships than you do? The answer was even simpler. You make them defeat themselves. Human traders suddenly started having supply problems. Shipments of critical materials to hegemony worlds were delayed, lost, or delivered to the wrong addresses. Hegemony ships found that replacement parts were mysteriously unavailable or priced so high that they could not afford them. Human engineers working on civilian projects throughout the galaxy discovered that their research had produced some interesting results. Sensor jamming technology, computer viruses that could shut down entire fleets, weapon systems that definitely had not existed a week ago. The hegemony had been expecting a traditional war. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake coordinated much of the effort from his small cabin on the New Horizon. He had become the unofficial leader of the human resistance, though. No one had appointed him, and he had never asked for the job. It had just happened, the way things often happened with humans. "Status report," he said during another video conference. "The Hegemony Third Fleet is dead in space," reported Maria Santos from the Asteroid Mining Station series. "Their computer systems got infected with something nasty. They can't even turn on their lights." The Fifth Fleet tried to attack the human colony on Kepler 442. Added Dr. Walsh from Proxima Station. "They ran into our new defense satellites. Turns out our communication relays were actually weapons platforms. Who knew?" "What about the fleet that hit Earth?" Jake asked. "Still in Earth orbit," replied Captain Jennifer Blake from the cargo ship Free Enterprise. "But they're having problems. Their supply ships keep exploding. Very mysterious." Jake nodded. "Good. Keep up the pressure. I want every hegemony ship in human space to know they made a mistake." "What about you, Jake?" asked Pete Chen. "Where are you heading?" Jake looked at the star chart on his screen. The New Horizon was currently 3 days away from the Zephyrian capital. "I'm going to talk to an old friend," Jake said. "Time to see if the Empress meant what she said about helping humans." What Jake did not know was that Empress Lyralai had been hoping he would contact her. She had been watching reports of the human resistance with amazement and growing admiration. Somehow, without a central government or military command, humans had managed to organize a response that was causing serious problems for the hegemony. It was the most human thing she had ever seen, turning a disaster into an opportunity to show the galaxy what they were really capable of. She was also worried about Jake. In all the chaos of war, she had no way of knowing if he was safe. The Empress was about to find out that Jake Miller was not just safe. He was angry, and an angry human, she was learning, was one of the most dangerous things in the galaxy. Jake's request for a meeting with the Empress came through official channels, but Lyralai recognized his name immediately. She cleared her entire schedule and agreed to meet him in her private office instead of the formal throne room. When Jake walked in, she could see the change in him immediately. The relaxed, easygoing engineer she had met weeks ago was gone. In his place was someone harder, colder, with eyes that seemed to calculate the weak points in everything he looked at. "Hello, Lyra," Jake said quietly. "Hello, Jake," she replied. "I'm sorry about Earth, about your family." Jake nodded once. "Thank you. I came here to talk business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that ends this war," Jake said. "I know who you really are, by the way. Took me a while to figure it out, but I'm not completely stupid." Lyra felt her stomach drop. "When did you know?" "About 2 days ago," Jake said. "One of my engineer friends sent me a picture of the Zephyrian Empress and asked if I'd ever seen her before. Imagine my surprise when I recognized the woman who complained about coffee with me for a week." "Are you angry?" Jake considered the question seriously. "No, not about that. You had your reasons for not telling me. But I am angry about other things, and I need your help to fix them." "What do you need?" Jake activated a holographic display from his tablet. Star maps appeared in the air between them, showing ship movements throughout the galaxy. "The hegemony made a mistake," Jake said. "They thought hitting Earth would make humans surrender. Instead, it made us stop pretending we're not dangerous." Lyra studied the maps. "What am I looking at?" "The results of 3 weeks of humans being angry," Jake explained. "Red dots are hegemony ships that have been disabled or destroyed. Blue dots are human ships. Green dots are hegemony supply convoys that have disappeared." The map was covered in red and green dots. The blue dots, representing human ships, seemed to be everywhere at once. "How is this possible?" Lyra asked. "Humans don't have a large military." "That's what the hegemony thought too," Jake said with a smile that was not entirely pleasant. "Turns out humans have been building things for centuries that can be turned into weapons when necessary. We just never bothered to mention it." He changed the display to show detailed reports. Cargo ships that somehow have military-grade shields and weapons. Research stations that turn out to be armed fortresses. Mining operations that can produce enough explosives to take out entire fleets. The hegemony is discovering that humans have been preparing for war without actually preparing for war. How? "Because we expect things to go wrong," Jake explained. "When humans build a research station, we build it to survive attacks by pirates, asteroid impacts, and hostile alien life forms. When we build a cargo ship, we build it to fight off raiders and survive in dangerous space. We don't call it military equipment because we don't think of it that way. It's just being prepared." Lyra was beginning to understand. "So when war actually came, we discovered that all our civilian infrastructure was actually a military infrastructure that no one had been counting," Jake finished. "The hegemony thought they were fighting a young species with limited resources. They're actually fighting a species that has been accidentally preparing for total war for 200 years. The display changed again, showing economic data. "But the real damage isn't military," Jake continued. "It's economic. Humans control more trade routes and supply chains than anyone realized. When we decided to stop cooperating with the hegemonies, war effort, their entire economy started falling apart." "You're destroying them without actually fighting them," Lyra said with amazement. "We're letting them destroy themselves," Jake corrected. "The hegemony is a military alliance. They're good at conquest, but terrible at logistics. They depend on other species to handle the boring stuff like shipping food and maintaining equipment. Guess which species has been handling a lot of that boring stuff? Humans." "Exactly. And now we're on strike." Lyra sat back in her chair. "This is incredible. But what do you need from me?" Jake's expression became serious again. "The war isn't over yet. The hegemony is desperate, which makes them dangerous. They're going to try something stupid. And when they do, I need the Zephyrian fleet to be ready to help. Help with what? Ending this before more people die, Jake said. The hegemony is planning one last major attack. Intelligence suggests they're going to hit the human colony worlds directly, trying to force a surrender by threatening civilians. That's monstrous. That's war, Jake replied. But we can stop them if we work together. Human ships are fast and smart, but we don't have enough heavy firepower. Zephyrian ships have the firepower, but they're not used to fighting the way humans fight. You want to combine our fleets. I want to teach your admirals how humans really fight wars, Jake said. Not the clean, honorable battles they teach in military academies. Real war, messy, unfair, whatever it takes war. Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment. My advisors will say this is too risky, that we should stay neutral. Your advisors didn't watch their home planet burn, Jake said quietly. I did. I saw the reports. 50 million people dead in the first day, including children who never hurt anyone. The hegemony made this personal when they decided to target civilians. And if we lose, we won't, Jake said with absolute certainty. The hegemony is used to fighting species that fight like them. Big fleets, formal battles, winner takes all. They have no idea how to fight humans who refuse to play by those rules. Lyrelai made her decision. What do you need? Over the next week, Jake worked directly with Zephyrian military commanders, teaching them concepts that made traditional admirals very uncomfortable. Ideas like asymmetric warfare and distributed command structure and making the enemy defeat themselves. Admiral Kane, the Empress's top military advisor, was particularly skeptical. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare, he complained during one strategy meeting. The hegemony stopped being civilized when they murdered civilians, Jake replied calmly. Now we fight to win, not to look good doing it. But these tactics, they're dishonest, deceptive. Jake looked at him with cold eyes. Admiral, my 8-year-old nephew was vaporized along with his entire city. His sister was 6. Do you think they care about honest tactics? The Admiral fell silent. Jake turned to address the room. Look, I understand this isn't how you normally do things, but the hegemony isn't a normal enemy. They're fanatics who think might makes right. You can't defeat fanatics by being reasonable. You defeat them by being smarter. The plan they developed was unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. Instead of meeting the hegemony fleet in direct battle, they would use combined human Zephyrian forces to attack the enemy's weak points simultaneously. Human ships would disable hegemony communications and supply lines. Zephyrian heavy cruisers would provide firepower when needed, but most importantly, they would make the hegemony think they were winning right up until the moment they lost. It's like fixing a broken engine, Jake explained to Lyrelai during a private moment. You don't attack the strongest part first. You find the one small part that everything else depends on, and you fix that. Or in this case, break it. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Jake said. Humans learned a long time ago that most problems have simple solutions. Other species seem to think that complicated problems need complicated answers. Sometimes the best way to solve a complicated problem is to make it into a simple problem. And how do you make a war simple? Jake smiled, and for the first time since Earth was attacked, it was a genuinely happy smile. You make sure the other side can't fight back. The final battle was scheduled to begin in 48 hours. The hegemony was massing their remaining fleets for one last assault on human colonial worlds. They were expecting the humans to defend those worlds directly. They were going to be very surprised when they discovered that the humans had other plans. Plans that involved teaching the galaxy a lesson about what happened when you made humans angry. Jake spent the last night before battle in the Empress's private garden looking up at the stars. Lyra Lee found him there, sitting quietly on a bench. "Nervous?" she asked, sitting beside him. "No," Jake said. "Ready." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Lyra Lee spoke. "Jake, after this is over, what will you do?" Jake looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since he had arrived. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I haven't thought past tomorrow. Maybe you should start thinking about it." "Maybe I should," Jake agreed. "But first we have a war to finish." The war ended on a Tuesday, not with a massive space battle or dramatic final confrontation, but with a simple message broadcast across all hegemony communication channels. "This is Jake Miller, speaking for humanity. Your war is over. Your fleets are disabled. Your supply lines are cut. Your economy has collapsed. Surrender now and we'll discuss terms. Keep fighting and we'll finish what you started." The hegemony's response was predictable. They tried to attack the human colonies anyway. It did not go well for them. Jake watched the results from the command center of the Zephyrian flagship, standing beside Empress Liralai as reports came in. From across the galaxy, "Hegemony First Fleet is dead in space," reported Admiral Kane, his voice filled with amazement. "All ships disabled by computer viruses. No casualties on our side." Third Fleet tried to attack New Shanghai Colony. Came another report. They ran into the defense grid that the colonists built last week. Apparently, mining equipment makes very effective orbital weapons when properly configured. "Fifth Fleet is requesting permission to surrender," reported a communications officer. "Their supply ships were, well, they exploded. All of them. Simultaneously?" Jake nodded calmly. "Accept their surrender. Send recovery ships to pick up survivors." Lyra Lee looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "How did you coordinate all this? The timing was perfect." "I didn't coordinate anything," Jake said. "That's the point. Humans don't need someone giving orders from the top. We just need to understand the problem and agree on the solution." "But how did everyone know what to do?" Jake smiled. "Because we all grew up fixing things. When something breaks, you figure out why it broke and you fix it. The hegemony was broken, so we fixed them." The reports kept coming in, each one more impressive than the last. Hegemony forces throughout the galaxy were discovering that everything they depended on had simultaneously stopped working. Ships without fuel, weapons without ammunition, communication systems filled with viruses that played human music instead of transmitting orders. "It's like watching magic," Admiral Kane said quietly. "It's not magic," Jake replied. "It's just humans being humans. We're very good at solving problems when we put our minds to it." The formal surrender came 6 hours later. General Krex, the hegemony military leader who had planned the attack on Earth, appeared on the main screen looking defeated and confused. We surrender," he said reluctantly. "But I don't understand. How did you defeat us so completely? We had superior numbers, better weapons, stronger ships." Jake stepped forward. "You made 3 mistakes, General. First, you thought humans were weak because we prefer making friends to making enemies. Second, you thought we were primitive because our technology looked simple. Third, you hurt our families. I still don't understand." "Let me explain it in terms you can understand," Jake said calmly. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands. of years. We've learned that the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy can't fight back. While you were building bigger guns, we were learning how to take away your ability to use guns at all. But your technology works better than yours because it's designed by people who expect things to break, Jake interrupted. Your ships are impressive until someone hacks their computers. Your weapons are powerful until someone cuts off your supply of ammunition. Your fleets are unstoppable until someone makes them stop. General Krex was quiet for a moment. And the third mistake? Jake's expression became cold again. You killed our children. Humans can forgive many things, General. We can even forgive attacks on our military or our governments. But when you hurt our families, when you kill our children, you don't get to walk away from that. You get to learn why evolution made us the species that survived everything Earth could throw at us. The surrender terms were surprisingly generous, mostly because Jake insisted on them. The hegemony would pay reparations to Earth for the civilian casualties. They would return all conquered territory to its original owners. Most importantly, they would never again attack civilian targets in any conflict. You're not going to destroy them? Lyrelai asked privately after the negotiations. No point, Jake said. Destroying them won't bring back the people they killed. Besides, they're not really our enemies anymore. They're a reminder to everyone else about what happens when you hurt humans. You think this will prevent future wars? I think it will prevent stupid wars, Jake replied. The galaxy just learned that humans are a lot more dangerous than we look. Most species will remember that lesson. The reconstruction of Earth began immediately. Humans from across the galaxy sent resources, expertise, and volunteers to help rebuild the destroyed cities. What emerged was not a copy of what had been lost, but something new and better. Jake spent 3 months on Earth, helping coordinate the rebuilding efforts. He worked 18-hour days, designing new infrastructure and training local engineers. He also visited the memorial sites where the cities had been destroyed. He stood for a long time at the Denver Memorial, reading the names of the millions who had died. Lisa Miller Patterson, Mark Patterson, Amy Patterson, age 8, Ben Patterson, age 6. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, he said quietly to the names on the wall. But I made sure they paid for what they did to you. When he returned to space, Jake was surprised to find Empress Lyrelai waiting for him at the spaceport. She was wearing simple clothes again, not her formal robes. Hello, Jake, she said. Hello, Lyra, he replied. What are you doing here? Waiting for you to come home. Jake looked at her for a long moment. This isn't my home. It could be, she said quietly, if you wanted it to be. They walked through the station together, not talking much, just enjoying each other's company. Finally, Jake broke the silence. I'm not sure I know how to do this, he said. Do what? This. Whatever this is between us. I'm just an engineer, Lyra. I fix things. You run an empire. Lyrelai stopped walking and turned to face him. You're right. You are just an engineer who organized the defense of an entire species. An engineer who taught the galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated. An engineer who ended a war by being smarter than everyone else. I had help. Yes, you did. But you brought us all together. You made it work. She paused. Do you remember what you told me about human engineering? About building things that can be easily repaired? Yeah. I think relationships work the same way, she said. Simple design, easy to maintain, built to last. Jake smiled for the first time in months. You want to try building something together? I do. It won't be easy. I'm stubborn, I hate politics, and I still think your coffee is terrible. I'll work on the coffee, Lyra said with a laugh. Their wedding 6 months later was, as Jake insisted, simple. No elaborate ceremonies or political pageantry. Just two people making promises to each other in front of their friends and family. The only special request Jake made was that the ceremony include real Earth coffee and that someone please fix the palace's environmental systems because the humidity control was still terrible. At the reception, Captain Rodriguez gave a toast that made everyone laugh. I always knew Jake would end up with someone important. I just figured it would be someone who appreciated good engineering, not someone who ruled half the galaxy. Same thing, Jake replied, raising his cup of proper Earth coffee. Good engineering and good leadership both require the same skills. See the problem clearly, find the simple solution, and don't give up until it works. Later, when the celebration was winding down, Jake and Lyra stood together on the palace balcony, looking out at the stars. Any regrets? She asked. About what? About giving up your simple life as a cargo ship engineer. Jake considered the question seriously. No regrets, but I do have one condition. What's that? I want to keep fixing things. Ships, stations, problems, whatever needs fixing. That's who I am. I wouldn't want you to be anyone else, Lyra said. Besides, running an empire is basically just fixing problems on a larger scale. In that case, Jake said, pulling her closer, we're going to need better coffee. Years later, when historians wrote about the human hegemony war, they would struggle to explain how humanity had achieved such a complete victory with such limited resources. The answer, they eventually concluded, was simple. Humans didn't fight the war the hegemony expected. Instead of trying to match their enemy's strengths, humans had eliminated their enemy's ability to use those strengths at all. It was a very human approach to problem solving. If you can't win the game, change the rules. But the real lesson of the war, the one that shaped galactic politics for generations to come, was even simpler. Don't mess with human families. Because when you hurt people that humans care about, you don't get to fight a civilized war anymore. You get to discover why the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and asteroid impacts doesn't stay scared for very long. You get to learn why humans win. Jake Miller never became a famous war hero or celebrated military leader. He remained what he had always been, an engineer who fixed things that were broken. He just happened to be very good at recognizing when the thing that was broken was bigger than a ship's engine, and sometimes when the thing that was broken was big enough, fixing it required changing the entire galaxy. But that was fine with Jake. After all, that's what engineers did. They fixed things.